Hey everyone, Ed Helms here. You might know me as Andy from The Office or Stu from The Hangover, or you might know me as the co-founder of BGS. I know, I'm just as surprised as you. They let me co-found something. But here's the thing, we're doing it again. Yeah, this time we're leaping into our other deep love, the vast and vibrant world of country music, with something we're calling Good Country. Now, this isn't just another newsletter. Think of Good Country as a place. A place where you can explore, learn, and dig into all of what makes country good. Seriously, country music has so much going on these days, and it's coming from so many different deep and soulful places, and we're here to cover all of it, just as we've done for bluegrass and roots music at BGS for over a decade. So sign up now at goodcountrybgs.substack.com and let us bring you the many sides of country music straight to your inbox. Good Country. It's a nice place to be.
Hey, it's Cindy Howes from the podcast Basic Folk, where we have honest conversations with folk musicians. Check out our very special 250th episode featuring an interview and performance with Basic Folk co-host Lizzie No.
I feel like most women I know have an experience where they've been working to perform and to execute and to please everyone else. And then things sort of fall apart a little bit in some way or another. And partying can actually be a really important step towards getting free, because it shows you where you need to fall apart, and being on the dance floor, like in community with other women and in community with queer people. Like for me, those experiences have been so important.
This time, Lizzie is on the other side of the mic talking about and performing songs from their brand new album, Halfsies. Basic Folk's 250th episode with Lizzie No is streaming now on the Bluegrass Situation Podcast Network. Join us there or wherever you get podcasts. Hi, and welcome to Basic Folk, where we have honest conversations with folk musicians on the Bluegrass Situation Podcast Network. It's me, Cindy Howes, the host of this podcast. Joe Pug is our guest today. Joe Pug returns to Basic Folk, a great triumph for all. Before we get into it, let's talk about staying in touch. The best way to do it is you can sign up for our monthly newsletter. You can do that at our website, basicfolk.com, or there is a link in the show notes. You can follow us on social media. We're on Instagram, Facebook, and the TikTok at Basic Folk Pod. We're a listener-supported podcast. You can pitch in a couple bucks every month at basicfolk.com in the donate section, or in the store. You can get a Basic Folk beanie that is hand-knit by my mom. And there is a link in the show notes to check that out as well. Okay, great. See you in your inbox or in your scroll or in your actual mailbox. Okay, Joe Pug. Joe Pug will not engage in the left brain versus right brain debate. His artistry and pragmatic business sense have lived in actual parallel through his music career. His songwriting and creativity are fueled by passion and result in dramatic and exciting songs, as on his new album, Sketch of a Promised Departure. He also has stayed ahead of the curve and created an ecosystem where self-reliance, growth, and music business thrive, especially with his latest venture, The Nation of Heat Vault, that has every album, podcast, and newsletter up behind a paywall. In our interview, we dig into his creative process, artistic balance, and family life while creating his latest project. The album was made on his own time at his new home studio, which he's been working on for over a decade. His reflection of having complete control over the music production is one of relief and joy, in that he was able to take as long as he wanted. We go through several of the songs on the album, remarking on songs like Then the Rain, which shines in its simplicity, just like many of Lucinda Williams' songs, one of his biggest inspirations. We also talk about his life journey into adulthood when he moved to Chicago, which is a chapter in his life he is writing about in detail on the new album. He talks about what he hopes for his own young kid's future and how parenting has changed since he first became a dad 7 or 8 years ago. And of course, we talk about his fantastic podcast, The Working Songwriter, and how being an interviewer has changed his attitude about being the interviewee. We're going to take a listen to a few songs throughout this interview from Joe Pug's new album, Sketch of a Promised Departure. So stick around. Hope you enjoy our conversation with Joe Pug on Basic Folk.
Man you can think of with a pistol in his hands. You don't fool me once. All this talk of revolution from a money lender's son. I've been around, I've been around, I've been around long enough to hear all of the fighting words I need to. I've been around, I've been around, I've been around long enough to see through all the things I need to see through.
Joe Pug, thanks for coming back on Basic Folk.
It's great to see you again, and I really appreciate you having me back on. Thank you.
So my high school band teacher used to say this, and thinking of it really was reminding me of you today while I was doing my Joe Pug deep dive. He would say the reward is worth the effort. I feel like this is a theme that comes up for you and your career. Like, you have put a lot of work into it, and you are where you are because of that effort. But how does that land with you? The reward is worth the effort. And historically, how have you related to the effort?
I'll answer it backwards. I've always liked the effort of it. It's an easy job on both sides of it. Obviously, the easiest part of the job is going to play the shows and doing that sort of thing. But it's even easy on the end of it, of figuring out how to make it work as a business, because when it's something that you love, learning how to do QuickBooks because it's something that you love is totally different. It's like doing dishes for your husband or your wife. You know what I mean? It's like, well, I don't, maybe I'm not into doing dishes, but I love this person, so I'm going to. I love doing the dishes, and they're happy when they get home from work. And then how does it land with me? The reward is worth the effort. I really like what I do. I mean, I have so many friends that don't like what they do for a living. And on one hand, that's friends that don't make any money doing what they're doing, so they're bummed out about that. Or the friends who do make money, there is zero amount of meaning in what they do, so they're bummed out about that. And of course, I'm always worried about money to some degree, like any artist is. But, so far, so good, knock on wood. It's been, I really enjoy the job, and I don't lie awake at night worried about money all the time, just part of the time. So that's, part of the course.
Okay, yeah, that's good. Yeah. I mean, if you should worry a little bit, I guess, if you want to get anything done, right?
Yes.
Something else I noticed, there seems to be a divide in you. Like, your songs are filled with romance, not just like as in romantic love, but romance, drama, emotion. You as a person, we don't know each other. Spoiler alert. You as a person seem very practical, pragmatic, analytical, business oriented. How do these two parts of you coexist? And do you prefer one side over the other?
Well, I just think that's the well-ordered human life to the degree that you can get it done, right? Like that they say that there's all these different theories about what the two hemispheres of the brains do. And I can never keep it straight, left-brained and right-brained. But what I have read and what I can kind of understand is that for the most part, one side deals with like patterns that and one side deals with novelty and the unexpected. And a good human life is kind of balanced between well-worn patterns and novelty. And if you err towards too much towards well-worn patterns, you're going to end up kind of ossified and a kind of a caricature of your former self. And I've seen a lot of artists like that, especially in the podcasts that I've done. I won't name names, but I've seen a lot of people frozen in time. I'm sure you have too. You can see people frozen in time. And then we all have the friends. We know artists that are just, they are so obsessed with novelty and the new that they never take any time to explore, very fruitful fields that they found in the past. So I try to the degree that I can, and obviously I get it wrong a lot, just like anybody else, but I try to ride the line in between those two sides.
Also, good vocab word, ossified. Enjoyed that one.
There you go. Yeah, really. There we go.
That's a good one. Okay. A little bit of a setup for this question. You were talking about working with world-class musicians of a certain caliber, and you mentioned this, and it's something that you've said before, and I feel like it's like kind of controversial, it like mildly controversial. You say,
Mhm.
I'm a songwriter. I'm not a musician. I can play the right chords, but that's not what musicians do. They're playing melodies, counter melodies, framing things, doing inversions of chords without even thinking about it. They just react. They don't think about it. So a lot of emotions I feel like felt when you, Joe Pug, say that you are not a musician. But how can you liken what musicians do to what you do as a songwriter? Like, how can you put what you do on their level?
That would be like me coming in. So if you had someone who, a lot of times people who are mainly musicians and not mainly composers or songwriters, they will do records of their own. And so if they were to ask me to come in and help out, I think what I could do with my expertise that they wouldn't be necessarily at home with, in the same way that I'm not at home on my instrument, is they can create, musicians like that can create just a vast bounty of different musical ideas at the drop of a hat. They can just do it without thinking. They can do it very quickly. But sometimes they have a hard time rank ordering them as to which ones are best. Sometimes they have a hard time, once they've identified which is best, figuring out ways to come back to that theme and repeat it over and over again in a meaningful and impactful way. Sometimes they have problems finding patterns in songs that can be used to dramatic effect. So if I was going to go in the same way that a musician helps me out with a record by fleshing it out, musically and with rhythm, I could come to a musician's album and help it out with composition by giving it those pieces of structure that not all musicians always have.
Your podcast, The Working Songwriter, you've been hosting this pod since 2015. Do you like to call podcasts pods? I really do.
Sure.
Yeah.
Why not?
Why not? Okay, great. Good answer. Since 2015. So next year, you're going to have a big 10-year celebration. You got to do it. You interview your peers and colleagues. It has given you a sense of membership in a co-ed fraternity of sorts and a sense of camaraderie. I also wonder how it has impacted how you approach or conduct yourself in an interview like such as this or in a conversation.
It's affected me big time, in that when I used to do interviews before this, and I think this was an effect of being kind of younger and a little bit more egotistical at the time too, but I could be a little bit more glib with interviewers. I could not be charitable with their questions and like try to get to the spirit of their question. You know what I mean? Whereas now, I've been on the receiving end of that. It just took being on the receiving end of that a couple times to feel profoundly disrespected, and it's just not. It's a gross feeling, and so that happened to me a time or two, and I was like, wow, that is not how you should treat another person ever for any reason. And so now, if I think that I won't like the questions that the person is asking me, or if I think the person will be unprepared or not cool, then I just don't do the interview. I don't do a lot of interviews because of that.
Mm-hmm.
And so I just won't do the interview. But if I have agreed to do the interview, I will come into it 100% wanting to make it a very successful event for both of us, because otherwise just say no to it. Don't do it. If you don't want to make it a successful event, in my opinion, then don't do it. But if you've agreed to do it, then try to make it as best as you can.
We should have a side podcast about doing a musician's podcast for maybe for the vault or something.
Yeah, it's funny. I don't know. And it usually, the people that I get the most stank from, it's usually inversely proportionate to how successful they've been. Like, usually the most successful people in this day and age are just they have kind of like the attitude of a winner in a way. And they just really, they will come in with a great attitude about things. And then, it's the folks that feel like they've been robbed of this, that, and the other that will come in and act like, I don't know, like they've seen as much success as Michael Jackson in 1987 or something like that, so.
Okay, I have heard you talk about how Tim Showalter, Strand of Oaks, and BJ Barham from American Aquarium are two musicians that you consider real, actual friends. Like,
Mhm.
you also have other friends that you're buddies with, that you hang out with, and I feel like the bar is whether or not you talk on the phone. You're
Mhm.
in an industry that relies on building relationships and connections. So to you, what does a friendship look like, and how do you differentiate between like being friendly with someone versus actual friends?
I don't really look to make friends with the people that I work with, to be completely honest with you. And that, I don't think it's for any business a very healthy thing to do. And for that reason, I mean, I haven't worked in a business sense with Tim or BJ in over a decade. You know what I mean? Um, you can be friendly with people that you work with, but because I see the boundary get skirted a lot in creative work, and it gets skirted a lot, particularly with people who run the operation. You hear this all the time. You hear people say, like songwriters that have bands that they pay, they'll be like, "We're not really a band, we're like a family." And I always tell musicians, man, like if you hear a songwriter say we're not a band, we're a family, get ready to get paid half of what you're worth. You know what I mean? Like it's like, guess what, man? We're not a family. Like look somewhere else for that. I just don't. I don't think it's a healthy thing to blur those lines. I'm not saying that I haven't ever blurred those lines before. Obviously we all do, but I just don't. I don't look to make friends in music. I just look to other areas of my life to make friends with people there and have that be a very private thing.
Joe Pug, not here to make friends. BJ actually gave you the advice to start selling your own merchandise by yourself. Bringing your merch in-house is how you put it. He said, run your own merch store, not because you're going to save some money, but because you'll understand your audience. Now you're also running the Vault, the Nation of Heat Vault, that has all of your material, every album, podcast, and newsletter that you have. It's up behind a paywall. So essentially, you have brought your audience to where you are, which is quite impressive. What have you learned about your audience because of these choices?
I've learned that I have enough people that care about what I do that I'll be able to continue doing this, which is great.
Great.
I really do think that 5 to 10 years from now, so when I started, you mentioned it'll be almost 10 years since I started the podcast. And when I started the podcast in 2015, I thought to myself, I better do this now before everyone who's a musician has one of these. And especially like bigger artists. And so I feel like that has proven out to be right. Like over the course of the last 10 years, it's like everyone ended up having a podcast in music. And it was good for me that I got in early. I feel the same way about this product that I built called The Vault, which is bringing people. It's like every podcast I've ever recorded, every album for streaming and for download, every newsletter I've ever published, and increasingly some short essays. I really think in 5 to 10 years, every single musician is going to have one of these going on. And it will be increasingly hard if you're in the lower to middle class of music, as I am, to get a foothold in the door if you have. Look, man, once the Casey Musgraves and the Jason Isbells of the world, like these very big artists, are doing this direct-to-fan type of stuff, it's going to be very hard to get any bandwidth as a smaller artist. So that's why I started that now, and we'll see if I'm prescient about this or not. But I feel pretty strongly about this prediction. I think I'm going to be right. We've seen it happen big time with journalists, right? Like I follow a ton of people on
Oh yeah,
Substack,
Substack.
and
Yeah.
and like a lot of what I started to notice is the writers that I really liked. I noticed the monthly charge come up on my card for $5 or whatever, and a lot of the people I hadn't even read something from them that month, but I would say to myself like, you know what? For the 3 articles a year that I really do like, and I want them to be able to continue to do this. Now I know that's not for everybody, and not everyone has, the financial wherewithal to be able to make a decision like that. But I do know that some people do,
Hmm.
and that people will get a lot out of this, what I'm giving them. But then also there'd be a month or two where they might see the charge for me, my subscription thing charging them, and they think to themselves, well, I didn't listen to a Joe song or a Joe podcast this month, but I really like the stuff that I've read before. I know I'm going to like some stuff coming up later. So, let the $5 go. It's
Yeah,
fine.
basically like they're paying for it or you're paying for it to continue to exist and be there when you want it. Much like public radio.
It's exactly it. And what's really funny, you mentioned public radio there. I think my pitch for it has kind of been wrong up until this point. My pitch originally had been like, look, I put all this content here. So like come access this content. But, I'm never going to be able to compete with like the big content providers like a Spotify or Disney Plus or whatever. So I'm kind of competing on the wrong level there. I think I need to kind of switch the way that I frame it more to like a public radio thing of like, do you like this work? If you like this work, the way that it gets done is by listeners like you. It doesn't happen without you. So that'll be my next plan.
We should have a pitch writing session.
Yeah, we should see how bad we can make people feel for us.
You know what I've been doing recently? So Basic Folk also has listeners supporting the podcast, which if you are a listener and you support us, thank you so much. What I did for our last fundraising campaign is I used AI to help me write pitches, and it actually wasn't half bad, and I'm pretty surprised.
Really?
Yeah.
Really?
Yeah.
I have not had a lot of luck with ChatGPT or any of that stuff, but I have a lot of friends who are savvy who keep on telling me it's my fault, that like you can make it work for you. But every time I go in, like I have a neighbor here in town who is a college professor, and I was asking him, I'm like, so do you have software to check to see if students, have used generative AI? And he was like, yeah, we got software. He's like, you don't need it though.
Yeah, you can tell.
He's like, yeah, he's like, because every essay begins with like, there were upsides and downsides to the War of 1812. Like everything, you can just tell, like there's no humanity or flair to it whatsoever.
Yeah. In
his opinion at this point. But maybe I just sound like an old man right now.
No, this is like a good time for this question though, in talking about AI. In switching to the subscription-based model, as with the podcast, you saw a trend happening and wanted to get ahead of the curve. And you say, I have to find different ways of keeping people interested. Like, what are you keeping an eye out for in terms of trends and keeping your audience interested? And what is your relationship to risk?
I do take a fair amount of risks, but only because I have to. Like, if I had a hit 10 years ago and I owned the master side of it and the publishing side of it, and I just had tens of thousands / hundreds of thousands of dollars just coming in the door, I wouldn't be risky at all. I would just sit home and count my money as I parked it in, Vanguard, ETFs and funds like that. But that's not how it works out for me. I've always been like a cash flow type of deal. So I have to take risks because I've been in the game for 15 years now, and I've watched the model change about 3 or 4 times. And I've watched people get left behind every single time, every single time. And if they ossify, like we were talking about before, they get really salty about it. You know what I mean? But welcome to the world of, making a buck. And guess what? Playing music is something that everyone would like to do, and everyone would like to make a buck on doing. So yeah, sorry, it's going to be really competitive, and everyone's going to always be looking for an edge, and it is what it is. I remember when Spotify first came out, and you could just kind of get on these playlists, and it just would get people huge, but then they would not build any other parts of their business to like back that up. So, as the algorithm gaveth, the algorithm then tooketh away, and they had no plan for that whatsoever. got mad about it, but it's like, well, you ever watch that show, I Think You Should Leave?
No. What is that show?
You should watch it.
Okay.
But my favorite line from that, there's a sketch on that called Coffin Drop. And on Coffin Drop, he goes, "I don't know what to tell you, bud." And, with people who have been left behind like that, "I don't know what to tell you, bud." Like, that's just how these things go. And you have to stay ahead of it. So to do that, to answer your question, Cindy, yes, I do take a fair amount of risks because I just have to. I mean, you have to make a bet on what's coming next or you will be left behind.
All right. Well, we got to get the Working Songwriter on the AI train.
And so what you said you use it for like generating, pitches of some kind, but like I've even tried it. You know how at the Working Songwriter I have like that thumbnail bio, kind of like you have a thumbnail bio usually at the start of your shows.
Yep.
I would try to do it like for that, like who do I have coming up on the show? Who have I taped recently? I don't know, but I would try like, all right, we had on recently this rapper from Canada, this guy named Classified. So I'd be like, all right, Chat GPT, write me a 400-word thumbnail bio of the rapper Classified and do so, with who he's toured with, who he's been signed to. And it just it gave me 400 words of unusable bullshit.
Yeah.
It was awful.
It's like
it wasn't even close.
You remember like what Wikipedia used to be like? It's kind of like that. If you don't give it like exact direction. So what I would do is after the interview is done, get a transcript of the interview. And there's a couple different ways to do it. Riverside, the platform that we're recording on, if you have a certain level of membership, you can get a transcript. I use this thing called Headliner that'll give you a transcript. And then I just took I take a bunch of webinars. That's why I know all these things.
I'm like keyed in right now. I'm all ears. So what do you do with the transcript?
Okay. So you take the transcript and you paste it into ChatGPT. So my interviews are usually about an hour long. I just discovered this website that is so amazing. It splits up your hour-long transcript into chunks that ChatGPT can handle. So you copy part 1, paste it into ChatGPT, and then, so on and so forth, like parts 1 through 5. And now that it has the complete transcript, it knows exactly like what the interview is about, what the conversation is about. And then from there, you can ask it to write you some show notes, or what I like to do is try to find some keywords for SEO, and then I'll find the keywords and I'll give them back to ChatGPT and say, okay, take these 20 keywords and write me 2-paragraph show notes based on the transcript that I shared with you. And I haven't tried it quite yet with the entire transcript. Sometimes the transcript is absolute garbage and I have to throw it away and just write my own. But I feel like with this whole complete transcript, it'll give me better show notes, and it gave me better keywords for sure, because I take those keywords and I do like a compare and contrast, and like Google Ads has a keyword helper, like a keyword search finder thing. And then I use it for like marketing purposes more than like prepare.
Yeah.
I can prepare an interview or whatever. But like sometimes it is helpful to have, show notes with SEO keywords so that your search can be enhanced through Google. I've been doing a bunch
that makes sense. First of all, it's going to be really meta when you feed this transcript into ChatGPT.
Like,
we've talked about it.
You're talking about me. You like me.
That makes sense. I mean, that makes sense. That seems like helpful, but that also seems like a very narrow application. You know what I mean? And like not a zero amount of your own time to do. You know what I mean?
Oh yeah, for sure. But like the thing I think that is kind of golden, and I think it's paying off is getting those SEO keywords in there.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah, and it also helps with like brain power, because it takes so much to do to prepare for an interview and do an interview. You're just like, whatever, can computer just write this for me? But how long was that? Like 10 minutes of me talking about ChatGPT and AI?
No, I find all this stuff very fascinating, because then we get into a whole other world of like I mean, now we're getting into the generative AI world for music, and
Oh,
that's going to be big time. Like, so I'm very not bullish on its ability to like write entire songs and stuff like that. But it is really gonna immediately hurt. Like, so right now it costs me about $400 to $450 to pay a drummer to do one track. Okay. And I'll do that remotely, which is a fair price for excellent drummers. Now we're going to be in a place very soon where there's going to be some Chat GPT equivalent of a generator where I'm able to go in and say, I need a shuffle tempo, dark snare drum, 92 BPM with fills on the 4th and 6th measure in the style of John Bonham in 1982. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And I don't know if John Bonham was dead at that point or not, but you get my point. Like, and that's going to happen. And then I'll be able to take that and use that as an element to the song in the background, put that in there. And all of a sudden that's saving me real money at that point.
Yeah. It's a real conundrum because it's like the right thing to do would be to pay $400 to get a good drummer and to add to humanity. But it's like, they have this is like a total tangent, but they have those like blue zones across the world where it's like 100-year-olds. There's like huge populations of 100-year-olds that exists. And like as soon as like the KFCs and the McDonald's arrive in those areas, like the 100-year-olds kind of like start disappearing because like people just like go for what's the easiest, instead of like doing the quote unquote right thing for yourself and for others.
Do you mean 100-year-old businesses?
100-year-old
basically?
people.
Well, so so they start disappearing because people just start going to more convenient places to hang out?
Yeah, there's like a whole Netflix series about this researcher, this doctor who traveled the world to the different blue zones. It's in like Japan. There's one in Italy. There's one in California. And he is sort of studying why people are living so long. And it's like people live in steep places. They're surrounded by community. They live at home for longer and are taken care of by family and whatever. So like these blue zones are like very pure. They don't have any McDonald's, but as soon as like McDonald's and convenience arrives, they go for the convenience because they're not like, we're a blue zone and we are, proud to live this way. It's just that the rest of the world has like got this culture of convenience that's sort of bogging us down.
It's tough. It's tough because all those people who are, wanting that culture of convenience in there, they have those forces pressing down on themselves. You know what I mean? Like, so the guy, who's hanging telephone lines, who comes through, who wants that McDonald's for his quick, cheap lunch, like he has those forces pushing down on him. His union probably got broke 25 years ago. He's making the same amount of money now that he would have made 25 years ago, but in 2024 dollars, which is, 70% as much. So I guess the question is like, can you take like an ethical stand and be a person who's having those forces pressed down on them and not transfer those costs on to people below you? And I think that that's a legitimate question.
Yeah. At the end of the day, I guess the answer is pay the guy $400 to do the drum track.
Yeah.
If you have it.
I think particularly with my type of music, that's probably where it will continue to go, because my stuff is like kind of handmade stuff. But here's what it'll end up doing though, Cindy. Like, so yeah, I'll end up continuing to pay the $400 or whatever it is for people to drum on it, but it'll just stay there for like 10 or 15 years because their price won't be able to rise. Like at a certain point, as everything inflates, it's like, all right, well now 10 years from now, what they would need for that track is $1,000. Well, I'm definitely not giving them $1,000 at that point. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
If albums are still making the same amount, so it'll freeze their prices in place. It's a very difficult. It's a conundrum.
Yeah. Wow. What a rabbit hole.
Yeah. There you go. Well, we're gonna have to face it. I mean, this is coming down the pike really fast, and I guess the buck is really going to stop with consumers. And if consumers are willing to go onto Spotify and just listen to, kind of AI generated background music, then that's what will happen. You know what I
Yeah,
mean?
yeah.
And a lot of the music middle class will go away. And if people don't want to listen to that, then it won't happen.
Right.
But it'll depend on the consumers.
Okay, let's talk about this new record.
Yeah.
Sketch of a Promised Departure. All of these songs are new. That makes sense. But to you, they're new. Like releasing such young songs so fast is a new experience for you. So an example is like one of the songs didn't exist, then it did exist, and 5 weeks later you're pressing it to vinyl. How do you reflect on like the speed of your process? Like, how did you not feel like you were rushed? What did you like about how fast everything went?
I liked everything about how fast it went, and I will continue to work like this. I think it is much more in an artistic spirit rather than building an album by committee, by getting a bunch of people's opinions and stuff like that. The older I get, the more and more, like I used to be told when I was in college, people would talk about writers who were like writing novels or short stories. And they'd be like, well, if you're a professional writer, you get together in like a grad school group with a bunch of other writers and you tear each other's stories apart. You read the stories, everyone gets 5 different sets of notes and you tear the stories apart. And I always kind of felt self-conscious about like, well, I'm a songwriter. I don't really like tear things apart like that. You know, that makes me a lesser writer. And the more I think about it, I'm just like, you know what? I've done a lot of creative work over 15 or 20 years, and I just really can't imagine what the experience of 4 or 5 different people ripping apart your work and like all that would do to me, in my opinion, is make the work much more vanilla and much more, you know, displeasing to nobody, so also pleasing to nobody. You know what I mean? So what I liked about working this way is I just made a lot of choices and I just made some choices and I went with those choices. And I think it comes off in a more kind of inspired manner. And there'll certainly be people that don't like some of the tunes because there's some strong choices in there. But the older I get, the more I just feel like making those strong choices, making an album that only I could make, for better or for worse. And, you know, there will be some embarrassing parts. There's already some, you know, I pressed the album on vinyl 5 months ago now, and there's already a couple lines that I'm kind of embarrassed of, but that's how it goes. That's fine.
When you play new songs for people, like brand new songs that you might want feedback on, you can tell instantly what they think of the song by their body language. And you also say people don't know why they don't like something. So, okay, you're playing a song for somebody. Their body language says, I don't like this song. How do you know why people might not like a song you play for them? Like, how do you figure that out?
I don't necessarily. So like the death knell for when you're playing someone a new song. So imagine me and you, Cindy, are hanging out. I'm working on a new record. We're going to go get a cup of coffee. And in the car to go do it, I'm like, hey, on my phone here, I have the rough mix for a new song. Can I just play this for you really quick? You're like, yeah, that'd be cool. And so I put it on. And now at this point, I'm not going to listen to anything you analytically tell me about it afterwards. I'm just kind of noticing you in the car and how you're reacting. The worst possible response I can get from you at this point is the song ending. And you go like this with this modifier in your voice. You're like, it's good. That is, you know, you have a true certified piece of shit on your hands. If someone goes, it's good. You know, if they're really leaning into it, if they ask to hear it again, if they ask to be able to send it to friends, you've got something. As to why they didn't like it or not, I don't know. I can make some guesses. Sometimes it's the mix, but usually with the mix, it's just like the only problem it could possibly be with the mix, if it's a lyrically driven song, is just that the vocals aren't loud enough.
Yeah.
They couldn't hear the vocals. But I mean, generally, it's just because the song is a piece of shit and it just needs to go. And I'm serious. I'm serious. Like, there's just really, you would be much better spending your time just working on a brand new song than you would trying to go back and, to go continue with my analogy, you know, polish a turd.
I wonder how like instincts play into that though. Like, do you know what the reaction is going to be before you play the song?
No, if I'm playing a song for somebody, I like it and I think it's good.
Oh.
I'm not like, it's not like some it's not like some test of someone's taste or something like that. You know what I mean? I'm not just like, I think this song sucks,
Right.
but let me see if I can get this idiot to like it. Nothing like,
Yeah.
manipulative like that. If I'm playing it for someone, it's like, I think this is good, but I have liked enough songs of my own that nobody has liked at all, that I just know that, how I initially feel about something is not necessarily the end all be all.
I arrived in town a week ago with a stone around my neck, and the girls lay roses down. Pretty girls lay roses down.
What's the first track on the record?
That is called Fast Asleep Inside the Garden.
So Alex from the label sent me your track by track, and you were like, no one else is going to like this song. I'm going to put it first on the record. But then you also wrote that you've been wrong about that, where like you think no one else is going to like the song, and then people do like it. I thought that was hilarious.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I guess it's a balancing act. I sometimes you do have to just go out there on the line and just be like, no one else is going to like it, but I'm going to put it out there. But you don't just want to be completely wrong about something. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And so
Yeah.
I do. There's a couple tested people I like to just put it out there too, who I do think have good taste.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Your mom, right?
I do. My dad, my wife has excellent taste in music. I'm not even saying that to get brownie points right now, because she will never listen to any podcast I do or anything like that, so she'll never hear this. But my wife has great taste in music, so I definitely run stuff by her if she has time to listen to it. She doesn't always have time, but
would you learn it from me?
Real cool. Another new element for you is your home studio. Well, it's not new exactly. You've been working on it for like a decade. And you said, this is the first album I have recorded there entirely. It's been a very long road to get to this level of self-reliance, but the creative freedom that it allows has been totally worth it. How has this newfound complete self-reliance and the creative freedom, how have that impacted your artistry?
It's allowed me to admit that I'm wrong a lot more. When you have an album budget and you go in and you have 2 weeks booked in the studio and you have, somewhere between 9 and 15 grand to go in and pay the engineer and pay the studio cost and pay all the musicians. And you come out after those 2 weeks and then you listen to the roughs a week later. And if they don't sound right, you just can't admit that to yourself because you don't have another 9 to 15 grand. That's it. It is what it is. And you start talking yourself into liking it. And now the stakes are just totally different for me.
Yeah.
Like I'll make something, I'll let it sit for 2 weeks, and I'll just come back and I'll be like, that's not even close to it. And that's fine. It doesn't have to be that. I'm not out anything except for my own time,
Yeah.
So I can afford to be wrong much more than I used to be.
Okay, yeah, so this plays into that exactly. So you are sounding the most like yourself than ever before. You are self-producing. You have your past couple of releases, and you have complete control over how you're working at home. I was thinking about this in particular since Nation of Heat Revisited saw you re-recording your debut album. Like, how do you relate to your past work? Like, would you re-record any of your past catalog again?
No, because no one really listened to Nation of Heat Revisited.
Oh, damn. Oh, it was so good.
So, no one really went for that album. And I don't know why. I think it was a good idea to try it. And I'm still happy with the way that it came out. But
I can't fucking believe that, Joe. I listen to that shit all year long.
Thank you. No one listens to it, but that's fine. And I can empirically prove it. I can look at the numbers on Spotify and figure it out.
I bet. Yeah.
So no, I probably wouldn't, but never say never, just because that project didn't work. You know what I'd probably do before I re-recorded something? I'd probably do some kind of like mid-career retrospective first. There's a lot of bands that like their biggest album, like Bob Marley broke in the United States with an album that was like a career retrospective. No one had heard of him in the United States. And then like basically a best of came out. Same with like the Eagles. Like the Eagles, like breakout was, their greatest hits thing. So I'd probably try to do some sort of collection like that before I tried to re-record anything.
Here's a quote from you. One of the most exciting times of my life was when I was in my early 20s and I struck out on my own into the world. I dropped out of college, moved to Chicago, and made a life for myself. Now that I'm older, the transition from childhood to adulthood is a past chapter in my life. You were able to write about that period in detail on this new record. How did it feel to revisit that younger version of yourself, and what did you learn about that version of you?
I see a lot more mistakes than I saw at the time. And I don't, I was very sure of my path for many years. And I'm not saying that I have a ton of regrets, like life works out how life works out. And,
Mm-hmm.
we all have a destiny. And I think that I'm still marching towards my destiny, but I'm able to, I had to shut some things out at that time to really, I had to shut some pieces of some data points out at that point to keep myself going. I had, in some ways, I kind of, the simple way would be like fake it till you make it. But like I had to shut out, I had to purposely not pay attention to myriad failures on a business front and on a artistic front to keep on going. And it's kind of shocking to look back now and think that I kept doing this. I do think I'm in a sustainable and happy place now, but it's hard to look back at that time in my life and not come to the conclusion that I was in some level very delusional, maybe benevolently delusional, like maybe delusional for the best and usefully delusional. But I'll put it to you this way. If I was my age now watching one of my children doing what I did in my early 20s, I would shit my pants. I would just absolutely be so freaked out. I can't believe how supportive my parents and my wife were the entire time. So thank God for them.
Well, and thinking about like that part of your life was part of the effort that you are now being, lack of a better word, rewarded for. And, your
Sure.
kids are still little. I think everybody is like 7 and under. So they're a little ways off from 20, but like, it's coming. From the perspective of a parent, can you expand a little bit more about like what does revisiting that time in your life make you hope for your kids?
I hope my kids grow up a little bit faster than I did. I think I remained in childhood a little bit too long. I didn't really grow up till I was about 32. And so
is that when the frontal lobe hits?
I don't know. There's all this stuff of like, well, people's brains aren't formed till they're 26. And it strikes me when I read that, it strikes me in the same way that, the Lewis Black joke of like, I heard on the news scientists say eggs are good to eat and now eggs are bad to eat. Now eggs are good to eat. It goes back and forth. And when I hear that type of brain science, it just really strikes me as the type of thing that like 10 years from now we hear like, actually everything's formed by the time you're 14. I don't know. I don't know how settled any of that is. So I don't know why. No, I think you can grow up much faster than I did, obviously. So, I just hope and I will counsel my children not to stay in a state of prolonged adolescence. I think it was a mistake on my part.
Do they already have like their own paper routes and stuff that they're building character?
We let our kids be pretty, I won't say free, completely free range because they're still 7, but definitely encourage that stuff. And like want them to have jobs and want them to, it's funny, when we first had my son, this is 7 or 8 years ago, we'd talk to people who were already parents and they'd ask, what our plans were as parents. And I'd say, the one thing I'm kind of suspect on is like all these devices with the kids and being on phones and iPads and stuff. And what parents would say 8 or 9 years ago was they'd be like, well, yeah, you say that now, but good luck with that because it's inevitable and they're going to have them. And there's been a real sea change in the last 7 to 8 years. Now, like most of the parents I meet of young kids, everyone is just like, yeah, man, we're not letting our kids just be unfettered on a device all the time. That's like letting your kid smoke cigarettes or something like that. You know what I mean? So that's how we're going about it. And I think you're seeing a big sea change in general with parents going that way for the most part.
You've talked about how the journey from childhood into adulthood is dangerous. Songs like Heroes Pass Us By and Brother John touch upon this. How did you come to this danger realization?
I mean, you just as you get older, you just see friends peel away and they just get it wrong in catastrophic ways. You know what I mean? And sometimes through no fault of their own. Sometimes through fault of their own, but they were wrong in a way that you were too, and you were just lucky and they weren't. Usually that's what Brother John is about. The song that guy's about, who meets a very unhappy end, dies a death of despair. The person that's about, yeah, he maybe got some things wrong, but he got them wrong in no different way than I did. And I was fortunate and he wasn't. So I don't know. We live now in a world that has been so mitigated by technology that it is easy to forget that life is dangerous. You know what I mean? Like we live in a very, the world's been made much safer, medically and otherwise. So it's easier to forget that nature is out to get us. You know what I mean? And, but it still is. And, so yeah, making that transition is really hard. There's a lot of ways to get it wrong. And most of us do get it wrong. And it seems to me that the only question is whether we're going to be lucky or not.
The song Then the Rain, I was surprised to read that you thought the song was too simple and that you wanted to make it more complex. And I feel like that's my favorite song on the record. It's like such a beautiful song. I'm glad you didn't change it. And you thought all of my favorite Lucinda Williams songs are so simple. So, Joe, what's been the evolution of your relationship to simplicity?
There's a guy that listens to my music in Ann Arbor, and he is like, he's a data guy. That's what his company does. They analyze data. And he came to one of my shows once. His name is Jason Harper. And he came to one of my shows once, and he delivered to me a dossier. And he had analyzed all my songs, and he had shown that over time, like the word count in all my songs, precipitously, album to album, had gone down. So he proved empirically that I've been making things a lot simpler or lazier. I'm not sure which. But yeah, I mean, like I've definitely tried to get better at having an economy of words. But yeah, I do think I've gotten better with, I don't know, shortening things, being more comfortable with letting the audience fill in some of those blanks. Like there's a Lucinda Williams song, Fruits of My Labor, that is, I don't know how many words are in that song, but there's not many. And I don't think I would have had the stones to leave it that simple. And yet it's one of my favorite Lucinda Williams songs. So.
It sounds like the last track on the record, which is an instrumental, also kind of you kind of like let simplicity take over because you were like having a hard time putting words to it, and then you just made it this like very cool short instrumental.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I tried for years to put words to that. I had like the A part written, and then I just couldn't do it, and so I just wrote a B part for the melody. And now, I mean, most of all, I don't have to have that rattling around anymore, feeling like it's unfinished. It's gone. I feel like it's, I can go do something else now.
That my enemies are slow, that my fevers are weak, that my lessons don't hurt, that my medicine is sweet.
The song Treasury of Prayers, you say this is genuinely a list of what I pray for in my day-to-day life. So this song is awesome, and I feel like it could be many songs in one, like an entire album, actually. So what was your reason to list everything together, and what's it like to like have it all in one place?
This is a very fun song to write. Very fun song to write. And I wrote it about this time last year, about a year ago. And I remember when I came up with the idea in the first couple stanzas, I remember thinking to myself, like, oh, okay, this is going to be, I'm going to get to savor this, because I think it's a durable idea, and I'm just really going to get to take my time coming up with all these. And I did. I mean, I wrote it over the course of 2 or 3 months. And even after I had first mixes done, I was going back and replacing some of the words. And now it's been completely written for, I don't know, 8 or 9 months. And I've been playing it live, and I don't feel like there's I took the time to really get that one right. And I don't feel like there's a crossword in it.
Feels like you could make a really rad playlist of songs like Treasury of Prayers. Like I'm thinking like Humble and Kind, the Laurie McKenna song that Tim McGraw covered. And then Bob Dylan's Forever Young is another one that comes to mind. There's probably like so many, but such a cool like list.
Yeah, Forever Young be very similar.
Yeah.
That you found heaven quick from here in Baltimore, my friend.
Okay, let's do the lightning round.
Okay.
All right. Joe Pug, what is one song that you and your kids can agree on?
Ooh, that's what a great question, Cindy. There's a song that they actually really like. It's actually a very new song. So if you'd asked me this question about a month and a half ago, it would have been a different answer, because the song wasn't even out yet. But there's a songwriter called Jenny Owens Young, and her new song is, oh my God, we were just listening to it yesterday. We've been listening to it a lot. It goes, da 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 da. It's Later Than You Think. So we've been listening to It's Later Than You Think a lot.
Wow.
And the kids give me that one, and they like that. The melody is so good that they can hang on to it.
Oh, cool. Jenny's the best.
Yeah, she's really cool.
What is one thing you miss about being a carpenter?
Oh, being physically tired when it's bedtime.
Haha. Who is your favorite football player of all time?
There's a receiver for the then Redskins, now Commanders, named Art Monk.
What is a book I should read?
Have you read, I think he wrote it under Samuel Clemens, not Mark Twain, but have you read his book about Joan of Arc?
No. I will read it, though.
Short read. He considered it his best book. It was serialized in Harper's Magazine in like 1895, but now it's collected into a book. And it's called Personal Recollections of Joan of Arc. And it's historical fiction, and it's written, the narrator is supposedly her scribe. And so he was with her on all of her, he grew up with her in childhood, and then he went on all the battles with her, and then he was with her when she was killed, when she was martyred by the English. So I would definitely read Personal Recollections of Joan of Arc by Mark Twain.
That's great. I'm on a classics kick. I feel like new books can't really jar the brain like a classic. So that's a great one.
Well, I mean, classics have just been like upvoted over time because they haven't fallen away, right? So I'm sure that there's plenty of stuff that's being written right now that will, but we just don't know. It's hard to kind of separate the wheat from the chaff at this point.
Yeah. What is your favorite Chicago treat?
I do like the Italian beefs with a lot of giardiniera on it from that place Portillo's. You know, it's have you been to Portillo's before?
No, I gotta go.
It's a chain. They do cheese fries and Italian beefs and sausages, but it's good.
2 more. Who is your dream interview for the Working Songwriter?
Gillian Welch.
Oof. Good one. All right, this is the last one. What is one hair care, skin care, or beauty product you cannot live without?
Oh, man. I like the Arm & Hammer toothpaste that kind of tastes like baking soda.
Best price. Best price, too.
Yeah.
Yeah. Great. All right, Joe, thanks again for talking to me, and congrats on the new record.
Thank you.
This episode of Basic Folk was produced by C.J. Nungesser, our music composed by Alex Stanton. Basic Folk is on the Bluegrass Situation Podcast Network. You can find all of our episodes there, wherever you get podcasts. You can also search for us on the SiriusXM app under Basic Folk. You can find us at folkalley.com. Or you can check us out at basicfolk.com. If you enjoyed this episode, we invite you to share it with a friend, maybe someone who used to live in Chicago back in the day and loved going to see Joe Pug shows when he was first starting out, and maybe they have since fallen off the Joe Pug bandwagon, and it's time to get that friend that used to live in Chicago back in the day on board the Joe Pug train. Thank you so much for listening all the way to the end, and we'll talk to you next time. Bye.